All right, so we're going to talk about how to study chemistry in the most effective way that we possibly can. And some things that I just want to talk about really quick before we get into it is I don't want you to think that this is like your crazy chemistry teacher's novel ideas. I am essentially summarizing a book about learning for you. So a book with a huge amount of research behind it. I'm just condensing it to the things that I think are going to be most applicable to you. If you do want to know what the book is, I can share that with you at the end of class. So let's talk about the learning pyramid. So the learning pyramid it's called Bloom's taxonomy. It is the levels at which we are kind of expected to know things, but also what you'll notice is that remembering and understanding the two lowest levels, they take a different kind of studying than applying or analyzing. So this is where a lot of people, I think, struggle in chemistry, especially if students tell me things like, I'm so good at biology, because a lot of biology is remembering and understanding. And yeah, you need those base things, right? You need to build that foundation or else your pyramid topples over. So you need the remembering and the understanding. But the problem is in chemistry, we go into the applying and analyzing in entry-level classes. And for the most part, you haven't been asked to apply and analyze. So essentially, if you're using the study skills that earns you A's in either high school science or college biology or whatever the course may be, and now you've taken your first exam and thought, wow, I was not as prepared as I thought I was. It's probably because your study skills are good for the remembering and the understanding, but they're lacking in depth to get you to the applying and the analyzing. So I want to help give you tools to get you to the applying and the analyzing, so that no matter what your career path or your school path is, you'll have those skills that you need. Because if you go into a PhD program, you're going to be up at evaluating and creating, right? And so we need to have the skills that correlate with being able to fully learn a concept. So here's our general tactics that we're going to talk about. First, I don't think I'm going in this order, but one of the things we're going to talk about is self-evaluating your thoughts. So when you self-evaluate your thoughts, there's a special word for that. It's called metacognition. Metacognition sounds super fancy, but it's just thinking about your thoughts. So we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about how giving yourself plenty of time is also just simply crucial, right? You cannot set yourself up for success if you cram too much in a short amount of time. Using a particular outline for study sessions to essentially trick your brain into converting things from short-term to long-term memory is going to be essential. And then being sure that we don't do all of our studying in one day. So brain science and brain research has illustrated that if a student crams, they might do well on the exam that's coming the next day. But the cramming doesn't turn any of your knowledge into long-term knowledge. And that's our problem. Because chemistry builds on itself, we need the studying that we've put in to be valuable so that we remember those concepts. So when you get to future chapters and you need to call on them again, you're not relearning things that you already hypothetically learned. So we're going to spend a little bit of time on each of these ideas. So I think the first thing I want to talk about is giving yourself ample time. In high school, you probably spent the majority of your time learning physically in the classroom, right? The high school is set up different than the college because in the high school, they are required to essentially force you to learn, right? They have you at school from 8 a.m. until 4 p.m. or whatever the time frame is. And you are in that classroom and you are expected to be working on problems and studying in groups and so on while you're sitting in school. But then you come to college and you find, you know what? That's not the case. I have all of this free time. Whatever am I going to do with all of my free time? And it plays a trick on your brain because you think, well, I have all the time in the world. I don't need to sit down right now because I have 0 things planned on Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. So what we need to do is force our brain to put some urgency behind studying. So we need to take those big blocks of time that we have available and start allocating them. You know, you have to say, this is what I'm going to do during this time frame. Because otherwise what's going to happen is you're going to be doing all of your stuff at the end of the week right before it's due. And then you're not actually learning it. Because a lot of people think that doing homework is studying, and that's just one facet, right? That's not enough. That's not going to get you to where you want to go. So we want to set up a schedule for our week. And the really crappy part is school is essentially a full-time job, even though it doesn't look like it. And the reason that's crappy is because a lot of you have, I guess, in a way, like real full-time jobs. Not that saying school is not a real job, but I mean like something that actually brings money into your pocket. So you essentially, if you're working while you're in school, you have 2 full-time jobs. And that makes it really, really tough. In some instances, I'd say it's almost tougher to, in the pandemic world at least, to not have a job, because then you have extraordinarily long blocks of time and no structure to them. So you have to be really diligent about structuring yourself. So here's the general formula that people in college and professors in college give their students. So the general formula is for every 1 credit hour that you are signed up for, you spend 2 to 3 hours a week per credit hour studying. So what does that mean? A 4 credit hour class, you will spend 8 to 12 hours studying. That's ridiculous. And I have students say, well, I mean, I don't have that kind of time. Yeah, I get it. I don't have that kind of time, right? That's a lot of time, especially if you're working while you're going to school. So I think that this study formula that they give us, or that is recommended that we share with students, is based upon this type of studying that normal students do. But let's not be a normal student. Let's study smarter. So let's talk about at the end how to study smarter so that 8 to 12 hours shortens up a little bit. So first I want to dive more into making your plan, right? I've got a weekly planner that's already posted in one of the early weeks weekly wrap-ups, but you can also just Google like free weekly planner with, time slots of 30 minutes and they will pop up. And so you want to make sure that you're blocking off everything. If you're coming to the problem solving sessions, you're blocking off your Zoom class time. If you have other classes that are meeting via Zoom, you're blocking off those times. If you're in physical therapy and you're going every week on Tuesday mornings at 8 a.m., you're blocking off that appointment. You are making sure that you are spending time exercising, because having that mental health and that physical health is going to help you succeed as well. So we want to make sure that we're putting aside time for, a walk outdoors, some exercise, some weightlifting, whatever you like to do, yoga, any meetings that you might have as part of a student group, or any other commitments you have, even if it's silly stuff, like pretend your parents make you sit down for family game night on Friday nights. Put it in the schedule. So then once you have kind of your skeleton, it looks like you got lots of free time. So fill up that free time some more, right? Yeah, my schedule looks super light starting at, I'd say, 4 o'clock. But in actuality, at 4 o'clock, my kids want me to read them a book while the kitchen's an absolute disaster and I'm trying to get dinner ready. And because my children are so picky, I make a meal for me and my husband, but before I make the meal, I take all the pieces before they're actually mixed together and just lay them out on their plate because they don't like things that are mixed. And so I make them essentially an unconstructed dinner, and then I make my husband and I a constructed dinner, and then I add that to their plate too. Cooking is a 2-hour affair in my house because everyone's interrupting you. You're trying to get the children out of the kitchen so they don't get burnt. It's a disaster. So, and then the eating and then the picking up afterward. And then we have a scheduled time for grocery shopping. We have a scheduled time for making your grocery list. Waking up in the morning, taking your shower, getting ready for the day, if you're driving somewhere, and then you're mapping off the time that you're done for the day, right? When you are just mentally finished and it is time for you to go to sleep, or maybe you wind down for an hour and read a book before you go to sleep. So those kinds of things are in your schedule so that you're allotting for all of the daily things, because then you aren't going to feel like you have such large blocks of time. And once you map all those out, then you can start filling in the rest of it with, here's my math class, here's my studying, here's my writing block. Over here, this person has one really long section to study. And then they go to lab at this time. They have a biochem lab this time. They have more studying in the evening, and they cut themselves off at midnight. Now, personally, I don't think you should study until bedtime. I think your brain needs a little bit of a break. But see how they have, workout. Church is important to them, so they have church in there. They have doing their laundry. These are things that we forget about. So make an actual schedule so that you're not scrambling at the end of the week. So let's talk now that we have a potential future schedule, a map of when we're going to be doing our studying. And you look at it and you think, I do not have 36 hours during the week to study for my 3 classes. What am I going to do? You are going to study smarter, my friend. You are not going to study the way that normal people study. You are going to follow a study outline. So first of all, you're going to study a little bit each day. That is going to help your brain turn your short-term memories into long-term memories. So let's talk about this middle part for breaking up long chunks. This is going to be the most important. So when you have a long chunk to study, what you're going to do is break it up into hour sections. And even if you have just an hour to study, what you're going to do is you're going to start with looking over your notes and pretend you want to study your chapter 4 stuff, right? So pretend you're studying your double replacement reactions. So first thing, you're going to skim your notes, or maybe you skim the book. Maybe you look at the learning objectives in the weekly outline. You're going to do something to prime your brain into thinking, I'm about to get some chemistry knowledge that's going to be about chemical reactions. So you're going to do that for about 3 minutes, whether it's, looking at your notes or just kind of reading the headlines in one of the chapters. And then you're going to ask yourself a question. So pretend your question is, how do I identify a double replacement reaction? Or maybe pretend your question is, how do I determine the products of a double replacement reaction? And then once you've identified your question, maybe take a little, mini break somewhere in there just for a minute or two, and then come back and you're going to spend 45 minutes of studying. And we're going to talk about what that studying can look like, but you're going to spend 45 minutes studying. Once that 45 minutes is done, you're going to take an 8 to 10 minute break. That gives your brain a more opportunity to rest. And when you come back from that 10-minute break, you look over what you just studied. And that's going to turn your short-term memory into long-term memory. Okay, so we start with a question. Once we have a question, we begin studying. We take a break and we review what we just studied. So let's talk about why you start with a question. You start with a question to give your brain focus. If you start with a question, then your brain will see redox and go, "Oop, not important. File that in a different folder. I only want double replacement stuff right now." So it gives your brain context to sort through the material that you're looking at. So the other thing, other than these very specific format of the study sessions, is minimizing distractions. And I would place a bet, and I am not a betting person, I would bet a quarter, that every single one of you has a phone within arm's length right now. And when you are studying, what needs to happen is only the electronics for studying are up. So if you are working on your online homework tab is up. Maybe your textbook tab. You have a periodic table, you have scrap paper, you have a calculator, and your phone is nowhere to be seen. You are not listening to music, because even though there are people who think that listening to music is helpful, that is not completely true. That is not what the research has shown. Research on studying and music has illustrated that the music only helps if it's music you don't know. If it's music you know that you can like tap your foot to and you know what's coming up and you can sing a little song with it, it's hindering you because your full focus is not on your studying. And you need to get rid of your family. And I know that's hard to do. So lock yourself in a room, put up a sign, Bob's study time, do not disturb. And get rid of your family. Because if you follow this, you will need less than those 12 hours because you are using your time incredibly effectively. Now, sometimes what people will say, and I feel this, that studying is boring, and so I need to kind of like take a break so that, I can stick with it. And I get that. I actually did an experiment on that a couple of semesters ago when I first read the book that I'm summarizing here for you. And what they said was, your tasks will take you a significantly longer time if you have those distractions of electronics. And so I was working on a project for school that was so annoying, like absolutely and utterly annoying. And so I was texting my friend Jackie the whole time, and it took me forever to finish. So let's talk, I think this is our maybe last one or second to last one, tactics for our study sessions. So what are your study sessions going to look like? So first of all, your study sections you're going to have practice. Reading will only take you so far in chemistry, right? We need to practice. Now, one of the keys with practicing is we have to shuffle our topics. So what I mean by that is if you go in and you start doing practice problems in section 4.2 of the book, that's great. But that's not your only time practicing. Because once you think you're ready, maybe once you've finished the homework, you take a sample question from each part of the chapter, and you write it down on a sheet of paper or maybe on a note card, you shuffle them around and you do them. Because one of the things that happens is when you're doing problems, either from the homework, either from the online homework or in the textbook, they're giving you contextual clues as to how to solve that problem and what that problem is asking and what topic it is on. So you need to shuffle those topics so that you give your brain a workout. You need to give your brain the opportunity to know when to use tactic A to solve a problem. So you got to shuffle the topics. And then the second part is metacognition, evaluating your thoughts, thinking about what your thought process was to get to that answer. One of the ways to do that is to explain it to another person. If you can explain your thought process to another person, then you have a fully thought out thought process. Another way to do that is to map your thoughts using a flowchart. So these are ways to make sure that you have fully formed thoughts, which is really important, because if you can explain something to someone else, you get it. Have you ever had a professor who you were like, wow, they were so smart, but they couldn't explain anything? False. They were not so smart. They didn't have fully formed thoughts in their head. If they had fully formed thoughts in their head, then they could have explained it to you. But because it came so simply to them, which is my hypothesis, as a student, they never had to make fully formed thoughts. And so now they struggle taking that material and bringing it to you. So I disagree. If you can explain something to someone else, you know it.